Good evening. This is Talking Sports with Evan. I want to thank you all for tuning in or listening to the podcast version of the show each and every week. I appreciate each and every one of you and lots to go over, talk about this week in the world of sports. I didn't get a chance to really break down the Packers 2023 season last week as I had Mike Wall on the show, and he kind of did it for me a little bit. If you want to go back and listen to the Mike Wall interview with me and Talking Sports with Evan, anywhere podcasts are found, Spotify, iTunes, you name it, you can find it, and you can hear what Mike Wall had to say. It's about a 30-minute-ish interview, and I thought it was very good, very informative. Did a former NFL offensive lineman's take on what went wrong in 2022 with the Green Bay Packers and what the Packers need to do in the 2023 season. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 2022 season and areas I think went wrong and whatnot in the free agency class the Packers have. I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts on Aaron Rodgers' most recent conversation on Pat McAfee and why I think people are over hyping what he said or what he didn't actually say, taking sound bites from what he said and fitting it to form opinions on what he said. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. The NFL playoffs well underway. I was perfect for the wild card round with my predictions on my Facebook page, Evan Witallison. I went out and projected who I thought would win each game in the wild card round. And for the first time in a while, I was perfect on my predictions. And I'm going to talk wild card weekend and give my thoughts how the divisional round is going to go as well. So, and there's some NFL coaching openings out there. Surprised there's not another one after the wild card round. But there's some openings out there and some names being thrown around, and I'm going to talk about what positions, based off what Mike Wall had to say last week, which positions I feel are the best jobs currently out there for NFL head coach. So with that said, going to jump right into the Packers and what Mike Wall had to say last week a little bit. So again, if you want to hear what Mike Wall had to say regarding the 2022 Green Bay Packers and where they go from here, you can check it out on anywhere podcasts are found. Talking Sports with Evan, iTunes, Spotify. If you go to my Twitter page at Evan Witt Sports, click on the link tree option, you can find it there as well. But Packers, obviously, 2022 did not go as planned as the Packers finished 8-9 on the year and a very disappointing 8-9 at that. And talking about what went wrong with the 2022 Green Bay Packers, it was a combination of a lot of things. It was injury issues that they had. Rashawn Gary getting hurt was a big problem in the Detroit Lion game, the first one in Detroit. Surprise, surprise, another injury in Detroit's Ford Field. I know a lot of players have criticized and gone after that playing surface repeatedly, and now we have another injury on Ford Field. So maybe the field is something to do with it. But besides that, Aaron Rodgers had a thumb issue. He had a rib issue. Then he had a knee issue all throughout the season. He just couldn't get on par with his receivers for a while because Christian Watson had an injury issue to start the year, as did Sammy Watkins, who ended up getting cut before the end of the year, as did Romeo Doubs, who had a high ankle sprain, missed a good chunk of the year. Bakhtiari in and out of the lineup constantly early on this season, kind of settled in. Then he had his appendicitis. Elton Jenkins took some weeks to get comfortable, and it took a while for the Packers to fix the offensive line issue, which was maybe Jenkins and Bakhtiari on the same side of the field together is a better option for the Green Bay Packers, and have Runyon and Yash Nijman at right tackle or Zach Tom once Nijman was not effective at all against the Detroit Lions in the final week of the year. So basically, injuries, big issue with the Green Bay Packers this season. They couldn't seem to stay healthy, couldn't seem to keep guys on the field. It was kind of frustrating and annoying at times. So that was a big issue. Coaching, I think, was a big problem with the Packers in 2022 on the defensive side. It didn't seem like they were playing together very often. When they did play together, the defense looked very good, as we saw in Minnesota, for example. Against Minnesota, I mean, at home at the end of the year, the defense looked incredible because they played within the scheme, the system, and they played the game plan to the letter. But too often, it seemed like the coaches and the players are on different pages throughout the season, and it was quite frustrating watching a lot of guys shrugging shoulders like, isn't that your guy? No, I thought that was your guy. Those things continuously being frustrating. The safety position was a disaster for Green Bay this season. Savage continuing to look awful. Had a good first half of the 2020 season and has been god awful ever since. Adrian Amos, I don't know if it was age or what caught up to him this year, but he was not the same safety that we had seen his first couple years in Green Bay. Rudy Ford played the best he could, but he's limited on what he can offer. So obviously the safety position is a big need in Green Bay. Offensively, it never looked like Rodgers and LaFleur are ever on the same page. And I know one of my friends in particular, but I know a lot of people are not really high on Matt LaFleur and his play calling and decision making, and I know a lot of people want to see him gone, but I have a hard time really judging what kind of coach Matt LaFleur is with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, because Rodgers has said there's two offenses. There's the offense on paper and the offense there's the offense on paper and the offense that he wants to run. And I think that's a big problem. And I think we don't get to see the offense run how it's supposed to be ran, because you look at San Francisco, you look at the Rams a little bit before Stafford got hurt. That's the way the offense is supposed to look, basically. That's how the offense should look. But for whatever reason, they don't run the offense the way it's supposed to be ran. So I can't really have a good insight or opinion on what kind of head coach or play caller, play designer Matt LaFleur is until either Rodgers can totally buys in and runs the offense how it's supposed to be ran more frequently, or we have a different quarterback besides 12 under center. They run a lot of shotgun. 49ers, Rams, a lot under center, a lot of pistol, a lot under center, a lot of movement. Things Rodgers doesn't like. He prefers shotgun. He prefers having a slower tempo. Either LaFleur or Rodgers needs to kind of find a middle ground on how the offense needs to be ran, or maybe it is time to see Jordan Love out there. So I don't know how that would work with the money the Packers owe Aaron Rodgers at this point. You can't really make a move, can't really make a trade involving Rodgers until after June 1st. And by then, whoever you trade him to, the picks aren't going to be as valuable because Rodgers is going to automatically likely improve that team as well. But there's just a lot of issues with the team this year, and this is going to be make it or break it season for Matt LaFleur. This is the first adversity the Packers had with LaFleur. First 3 years as head coach of Green Bay appeared to be extremely easy. Things seemed to come very easy for him. And now we got some adversity, and now we see how the Packers deal with it going into the 2023 season. Which, speaking of the 2023 season, the Packers have a number of free agents coming up in 2023. And I'm going to go through the unrestricted free agents really quick on who I feel Green Bay should bring back and who I think they should let go. First up on the list, corner, 2019 sixth-round pick, Corey Ballentine. I'm indifferent. He doesn't really appear on the field at all. He's a solid special teams player, and special teams were better, but he doesn't really offer you anything besides special teams. I'm fine if they bring him back on a minimum deal to continue to be a gunner on special teams, chasing down kicks. Him and one of the safeties looked pretty good doing it quite often this year. Rudy Ford, again, I'm indifferent on Rudy Ford. I think we saw the best out of Rudy Ford we're going to see. He isn't a great player. He isn't a bad player. Is what he is. He's going to do the best he can. He's going to not make mistakes. But the problem is he's extremely limited. And I think you could do better at safety than Rudy Ford. But if he's going to be cheap, might as well bring him back for special teams depth. I think one of the signings that doesn't get enough love or attention in-season signing of Justin Hollins. He was a in-season waiver claim from the Los Angeles Rams, and he played about 40% of the team's defensive snaps over the final 6 games. Picked up 2.5 sacks down the stretch and got a lot of quarterback pressures and hurries, including on his former team, the Rams, shortly after they picked him up. And I think Justin Hollins is one you should bring back if the price is right. I don't think he's going to command a lot of money, but he's going to be very useful to retain, especially with Rashawn Gary going to be, who knows when he's going to come back from his torn ACL. Preston Smith is who he is. He's going to bust his hump in there every game, but you need a guy opposite of him that you got to account for until Rashawn Gary is ready to play a full load. And they don't really have much other than a rookie who had flashes, but you don't really know what he is. And now you get a whole offseason of watching tape on him. Who knows what he's going to do in year 2. Allen Lazard. I think it's safe to say Allen Lazard is gone. I think it's safe to say that Lazard will not be returning to the Green Bay Packers. He commented after the Packers and Lions game, basically commenting as such that his first game of his career and as a Packer and his last game as a Packer are both against the Lions. I think he's already spoke his intentions right there. I think he wants to go someplace where he's going to be used as a wide receiver more frequently and not a tight end or tight end type, which they use him a lot for blocking and cracking down in the box, blocking the perimeter. That's what they use him a lot for. And I think he wants to be more of a receiver. I think that's what he wants to do. And if that's what he wants to do and he thinks he can get paid someplace to do it, good luck to Allen Lazard. Dallin Leavitt. He was a safety I was talking about with the Ballantine, who did really good on special teams this year. I think bringing him back would be important. He's one of your top punt gunners and kick gunners that you have, and I think keeping him on board will be very useful. You don't need him on the defensive side of the ball really, and if you're playing him on defense, you're in trouble. But I think you bring him back and have him chase down kicks. The savior of the season, Keyshawn Nixon. He was brought in as depth and special team ace. He ended up being one of the top kick returners in the NFL. And he's one that if you can bring back, do it. But I'm not going to overspend on him. I know it took them a while to find a returner, but I think with the lack of money and resources the Packers are going to have, which sounds like Goody's open to restructuring everybody he can restructure to work around the cap issue the Packers have, which I think they're 13 or 14 million over the cap right now. He's willing to try to restructure everybody who he can to try to bring that number more in line with what he needs to do. And if the money's right, if he's not going to ask for an arm and a leg, I think you bring Nixon back, but I'm not going to overspend for him. Eric Wilson, he can leave. I think he's one that he's a special teams guy. That's all he does. And I think you can better allocate resources at the linebacker position than a guy that literally only plays special teams, my opinion there. Other guys leaving, voiding contracts, other free agents that are coming up, Adrian Amos. He just didn't play well this year. And you got to think maybe his age caught up to him a little bit. Maybe he lost a step. Maybe he was overcompensating for not having a reliable safety next to him most of the year. I don't know what it is, but I am fine not bringing Adrian Amos back. But the problem is you don't have much of a safety room in general. You're going to be restarting from scratch at the safety position with or without Amos. Do you bring him back on a 1 or 2 year deal to see if he can bounce back to the level he was just 2 years ago? I don't know. Randall Cobb, I know Rodgers wants him back. He said as such as he would like Cobb back another year. Same with Mercedes Lewis and Robert Tonyan and Alan Lazard. But I don't think it hurts to have a veteran receiver in the room while your young guys develop. But I think you could do better than Randall Cobb. You could definitely do worse, but I think you could do a lot better than Randall Cobb, especially in the slot. Somebody who's a little bit more dynamic that you could potentially put in that spot. I'm fine letting Randall Cobb walk, and maybe he eventually comes back closer to training camp because nobody's going to sign him unless they think that by signing him, they can get Aaron Rodgers to want to come. Toughest decision, Mason Crosby. He has played more consecutive games than any Packer in Packer history, and thankful for everything he's done as a Green Bay Packer, but I think the time for Mason Crosby to leave is here. I think he's shown over the last couple years, and I know 2 years ago, biggest issue was the whole snap and hold process was a big problem, but I think we've seen this year that Mason Crosby just doesn't have it anymore. His kickoffs are short, low. His field goals are low. He doesn't get a lot of air on any of his kicks anymore, and he's become a issue back there for the Packers, kicking off. And I know Lambeau Field's a tough place to kick in, and he still has some value, but I think it's time for Crosby to retire, make things easy for the Packers, just retire and call it a career and let the Packers bring in a different kicker. And maybe he can stick around a little bit as a consultant on the coaching staff, working with the new kicker. Grateful for everything Crosby's done in Green Bay, but unfortunately, I think it's time for Crosby to go, as well as the next guy, Mercedes Lewis. I know he doesn't get paid much, but he doesn't offer you much anyway, other than being an extra offensive lineman. And the Packers have two tackles who didn't play at all this year that they could potentially use in that tight end extra offensive lineman role if they want to. I think you could do better than Lewis, and you need to revamp the entire tight end room and get some more dynamic playmakers out there. Dean Lowry, I'm fine with him leaving. He struggled most of this season, had a solid season last year, struggled this year, struggled 2 years ago. He has no consistency. He plays every game, but he has no consistency on what you're going to see from Dean Lowry. And I think it is personally time for Dean Lowry to go. Jarran Reed. Reed had a slow start to the year, but he came on late with some games, solid plays, did some great stuff in the interior, and I think he's one you bring back as a veteran next to Kenny Clark as your younger guys develop. You got some good young depth in that defensive line room with Wyatt and Slayton. But I think keeping Reed another year will be beneficial as those guys continue to develop. Robert Tonyan, if the money's right, bring him back. But I still think you got to upgrade that position as well. And they have 3 restricted free agents: Chris Barnes, Tyler Davis, and Yosh Nijman. I would be perfectly fine with letting Tyler Davis go, but I think Chris Barnes and Yosh Nijman are guys you want to bring back. You could give a second-round tender on Nijman, and if somebody claims him, then you get a second-round pick for him, so it's kind of a win-win. And then Chris Barnes, I think you give a second-round tender to as well. I just think he's not, Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell are your starters, but he's good depth to have in that middle, and I think keeping him around isn't a bad thing. An exclusive rights free agent, Jake Hansen. I'm perfectly fine with Jake Hansen leaving. He had a chance to earn a starting job this year at right guard when they decided they wanted Newman at right tackle, and he didn't play well whatsoever. Played better when he came in after an injury, but then he got hurt himself, and Actually, no, he didn't. It wasn't because of injury he went back in. It was just how bad Royce Newman was, is why he went back into the game, and then he got hurt and played a little bit better. But Jake Hanson's just a guy. You could do better than Hanson. He's nothing special. He is what he is, and you can improve. And the thing is, it should be about improving. So Packers have a lot of work cut out for them, and I think the biggest thing to figure out first is what to do or what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. And I think the easy answer is you're going to have Rodgers back for another year. You can't release him. You can't really trade him right now. You're going to have to wait till after June 1st to do either move to spread out the ridiculous cap hit over 2 years instead of just 1 year. And if you trade him after June 1st, you're likely not going to get very good draft pick out of it anyway. So I think you're better off just bringing him back for another year. Try to negotiate with Jordan Love. Hey, this is it for Rodgers for us. He's gone either way. If you want, either he retires or we trade him. This is his last year in Green Bay. We want to keep you around, and you offer him a contract extension to kind of entice him to stick around a little bit. So that's what I would do. If that's what Goody or the front office is going to do, I don't know. And then, yes, I know Rodgers had his comments about he still thinks he can win MVP, and now everyone's saying he's focused on the wrong thing and not what he should be. And I think what he said is being taken out of context, and what he said is, like I said, what he said he's being taken out of context. He said that back in 2019. Most people thought he was washed, and he ended up having back-to-back MVP seasons, and he feels that he can still do that. And I'm sure he would love to do it in Green Bay if Green Bay would have him. But that's the decision that Brian Gutekunst and LaFleur and Murphy, they all need to decide what they want to do moving forward with Rodgers, if they want him under center or to start moving on with Rodgers. That's what the decision they have to make. I personally bring him back. I think with the development you saw of Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson, I think it's worth bringing him back another year. I think Rodgers still has plenty left in the tank. The offensive line is going to be better with Bakhtiari fully healthy. Jenkins a full year removed now from his ACL injury. He's going to be better. The one extremely weak spot of the offensive line is Josh Myers, but I think you have an open competition at center with him and Zach Tom or a draft pick, and may the best man win. And you can, improve there. And you still got Aaron Jones, assuming they can keep him with a restructure to spread that money out a little bit, because I don't really like paying him having a $20 million cap hit for 2023 for him. I think you can negotiate that down. And with him and A.J. Dillon, you got a very strong backfield. You just need a more dynamic tight end, which you can get in free agency or the draft or a trade. Waller's a name that keeps throwing around. Maybe they trade for Waller. I don't know. But I think you improve the tight end position. I think the offense is going to have a big bounce back year with whoever's playing quarterback. And why not have that be Aaron Rodgers? Defensively, I wish they would move on from Joe Barry. He doesn't offer much as a defensive coordinator. He is what he is. He's nothing special. But unfortunately, it's looking like that's what we're going to be stuck with for another year in Green Bay. Hopefully the defense improves just by the talent level, gets plays up to their talent, and they play well in spite of Barry instead of just kind of going through the motions, what looked like they were doing at times this year. So what do you want to see Green Bay do? You can tweet at me at Evan Witt Sports. You can email me, talkingsportswithevan@gmail.com. What do you want to see the Packers do with Aaron Rodgers? Do you want Aaron Rodgers to be your starting quarterback in 2023? Or is it time to move on and let me see some Jordan Love? So other NFL action, playoffs going hot and heavy right now. Wild card round finished. And I'm going to just take it game by game and give my quick thoughts on each game. San Francisco, Seattle, they had the first game on Saturday, close for a while. San Francisco pulled away to win 41-23. I'm not surprised. San Francisco is a significantly better team than Seattle. Seattle overachieved this year. Good for them. Most people thought they were going to be awful after Russell Wilson gets traded. but they played their ass off this year. Walker, great find at running back, but overall, the 49ers are a better talented team, and they won, and I expected them to win. And just because the 49ers killed Seattle doesn't mean they would have killed Green Bay. And I know Green Bay didn't make it. We don't have to argue the what-if game, but I've seen a lot of people saying, well, I'm glad the Packers did make it because after watching that game, the 49ers would have steamrolled Green Bay anyway. I don't think they would have steamrolled Green Bay. Am I saying Green Bay would have won? Probably not. But I think Green Bay would have been a better matchup for San Francisco than Seattle was. I think they have better talent on both sides of the ball than Seattle, but we're never going to know how that would have turned out because the Packers didn't make it. So we don't need to talk about the what ifs and if the Packers would have been there and whatnot because they weren't. They lost to Detroit in week 17 and their season's over. The other Saturday wild card game, Jacksonville and San Diego. And after the first half, it looked like San Diego was going to rout Jacksonville as, 5 turnovers total in that game, 4 interceptions in the first half by Trevor Lawrence. I'm not going to lie. I thought the game was over. I'm sure everybody thought it was over. Well, I'm sure I have one of my friends that's going to say, hey, I said they were going to come back and win all along. I'm sure. But I thought it was over, and most people did, and it should have been. But Jacksonville comes back, gets the win, 31-30, last-second field goal. Chargers go home. I don't know how you bring Staley back after that debacle, especially when you have Sean Payton available. They fire their quarterbacks coach, they fire their offensive coordinator. But the defense is the unit that gave up all those points, and Staley's a defensive head coach. He's a defensive-minded head coach. Where's his responsibility in that? And I think Staley should have been the one to get terminated there as well. But good for Jacksonville. Good composure from Trevor Lawrence after that despicable first half, 4 interceptions to throw 4 touchdowns in the second half. Great for him. And he's going to have a bright future in the NFL with Doug Peterson. The early game on Sunday, Bills and Dolphins. I think it's safe to say majority of the people assumed Buffalo was going to win in a rout in that game. Third string quarterback, first year head coach. I think most people thought it was going to be a rout, but tip your hat to Buffalo. Tip your hat to Miami. But Miami did a great job giving Buffalo everything they could handle, losing 34-31. With a third string quarterback, with everything against them, I think they fared pretty well. And I know McDaniel is getting a lot of criticism with his inability to get plays in time. But again, you're going with a third string quarterback, and maybe McDaniel should have simplified things a little bit, and maybe Miami wins if he does. But I think he's going to learn, and he's a smart guy. He's going to learn, and he'll be ready with Tua likely at quarterback next year to make another run for the playoffs. And Buffalo scares me, but not in a good way. I love Josh Allen. I love how he plays. I love his intensity, but he commits too many boneheaded penalties. Not penalties, turnovers. He commits too many boneheaded turnovers, including red zone turnovers. I think he had the most red zone interceptions in 2022. He had that fumble in the end zone against Minnesota that Minnesota recovered for the tying score in that game. Buffalo scares me for all the wrong reasons, as they make piss poor decisions and mistakes from time to time. Giants and the Vikings, and I assume the Giants were going to win all along. I've been saying all season long that the Vikings are not legit. I think I have called them a fraud, but I guess I wouldn't necessarily go that far per se. But they weren't a scary playoff team. I kept saying they remind me of the 2019 Packers. A lot of things went their way, ball bounced their way often, but when they run against more physical teams, for the Packers, it was the Eagles and the 49ers and the Chargers. They couldn't do anything. And for the Vikings, it was the Cowboys, it was the Eagles, it was the now the Giants. And the Giants should have won in the regular season against the Vikings. They lost on a last-second field goal to give the Vikings the division. but the Giants are a tough team, and I think the head coach of the Giants deserves all the credit in the world. Dabo should be he should be the NFL Coach of the Year, in my opinion. I think he's done a great job in New York, coming up from Buffalo. I think he's done a great job with Daniel Jones and playing to Daniel Jones' strength, and I think he should be Coach of the Year. And if I'm Philly, I'm a little worried with this Giants team coming in because it's going to be a tough matchup. It's the third time they've played this year, and it's tough to beat a team 3 times in 1 year. Bengals on the Ravens, another score that was probably closer than most people thought, but kudos to the Ravens to keep it a 7-point game, and it was a tied game until a 98-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown, and I think it getting to the point that maybe it's time for Baltimore to go a new direction with head coach. The GM and head coach, you've completely the whole quarterback situation's a mess. You have one of the top quarterbacks in the league, and you don't treat him as such. You should have had this contract done a long time ago. Instead, you dick around, and now you're probably going to have to franchise tag him if you want to keep him, or find a trade partner and start over at the position. You got players on the team openly criticizing other players and coaching staffs and other, and it's just a hot mess in Baltimore. And for Lamar Jackson, good for him putting his body first over playing in that playoff game. And you saw 2 differing opinions from former quarterbacks. Michael Vick said he should have threw a brace on it. Robert Griffin III said you don't just put a brace on it, and I agree with RG3, as his career is ruined by just putting a brace on it. He could still be playing quarterback to this day if the knee would have healed properly, but instead he puts the brace on it, plays on one of the worst field conditions in the NFL in Washington, hurts the knee more, and he could never get back to 100%. But good for Cincinnati, moving on. Them in Buffalo is going to be an interesting game in Buffalo. Cincinnati's kind of getting screwed in that situation. It should be a neutral site as well, but they decided, nope, it's going to be in Buffalo, and it's going to be a snow game likely as well, as there's potential for some snowstorms in that area this weekend. And the final game, Monday night, Dallas and Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay, Wolf. Tom Brady looked every bit of a 45-year-old. He had no trust in his protection. So he was getting the ball out a lot quicker rather than letting things develop. The defense was a hot mess. One of the top defenses the last 2 years in the NFL. The defense was a hot mess. And Brady had no trust in anybody on offense. And Brian Leftwich is the scapegoat as he gets fired. I think the head coach should probably get fired as well, as I thought in New York with the Jets, he just got a raw deal. But he's showing that he is a better coordinator than head coach in what he did in Tampa Bay. And that was not a smart choice by the Buccaneers in giving him the job and keeping all the coordinators. When Arians retired or stepped down or whatever it is that he did, probably should have had a better head coaching search than just giving it to your defensive coordinator who already failed in New York. And like I said, I believe he deserved another shot as the head coach, but Tampa Bay obviously wasn't the right fit, and he showed that he's not a good head coach, as Tampa Bay was just awful. So with that, we got the divisional rounds. We have 3:30 Jacksonville and Kansas City, and I'm rooting for Jacksonville, but I know Kansas City is going to win. It's just the way it is. Unfortunately, Jacksonville's Cinderella season is going to come to an end with a Kansas City victory. It's going to be a lot closer than people think, but I just think Kansas City gets that victory. Giants and the Eagles. I think the Eagles win. It's going to be a dogfight. The Giants are going to fight with every ounce they can possibly fight with. But at the end of the day, I think the Eagles are just the better team, and they're going to get that victory. Bengals and Bills. I think the Bengals win. I think Allen is going to have a turnover at a bad time. And just like you saw with Baltimore and Cincinnati, Allen's going to have a bad turnover at a bad time, and it's going to end up hurting them in the end. And Dallas and San Francisco, I think Dallas wins. I think Dallas is the better team. on paper and on the field, I think Dallas gets this victory, and it's going to be Philly and Dallas for the NFC Championship game a week from Sunday. You have a rookie quarterback. He's eventually going to hit. He's going to hit that rookie wall. And with the defense and the pass rush the Cowboys can bring you, I think it's going to be this week that you're going to see the Purdy hit that wall. So I think in the AFC and NFC championships, you're going to have Cincinnati and Kansas City, a rematch from last year's, I believe it was championship game, and then Eagles and Cowboys in the NFC. So we're going to see Cowboys and Eagles for the third time. And if the third time is anything like the last time those two teams played, it's going to be a hell of a football game, that's for sure. And then some final comments. Tip your hat to Luke Fickell, the Badgers head coach, continuing to do work. I've already focused on the incoming freshman class that Wisconsin has coming in a previous episode, but their overall recruiting rank is now up to 36 in the country. Transfer rank, according to 247 Sports, 8th in the country, tops in the Big Ten from the transfer portal. And they've gotten CJ Williams, a former 4-star recruit from USC, to come to them. They had a 5-star kicker coming to them, Nathaniel Vacos. They had Bryson Green, a wide receiver from Oklahoma State, committing to them. Will Pauling, a wide receiver from Cincinnati, and Quincy Burholz, another wide receiver from Cincinnati. Brandon Locke, a quarterback from Mississippi State who's familiar with the air raid offense, playing with Mike Leake last year in Mississippi. Edge rusher from Michigan State. Not going to try to pronounce his last name at this time, but he's 6'1", 235 edge guy. Probably a good fit for the 3-3-5 that Wisconsin's going to look to play. Jake Renfro, interior offensive lineman from Cincinnati, and Joe Huber, offensive tackle from Cincinnati. Darian Varner, a defensive lineman from Temple. Jason Maltre, a safety from Boston College. Tanner Morakati, a quarterback from SMU, and Nick Evers, a quarterback from Oklahoma. So tip your hats to Luke Fickell and the work that he's done in a short time in Wisconsin. It's going to be great and interesting to see where they go from here and how all this talent they're bringing in, how it all pans out, and if they're able to hit on a lot of these guys, because now it's going to be up to player development moving forward. So with that said, don't want to keep you anymore. I'm going to give you an update on the open coaching positions in the NFL next week, and going to talk some Milwaukee Bucks next week too. Hopefully we have a Giannis playing Saturday after he's missed now the last 3 or 4 games. Hopefully Giannis can play on Saturday against Cleveland and he's healthy to go moving forward. And hopefully we get Chris Middleton back soon. So with that said, hope you have a great rest of your week, great weekend. I'll talk to you all next week talking conference championship games and the Milwaukee Bucks.